Welcome to the AMA. There's been a lot of questions from the community and a lot of questions that I kind of gathered around to see what we haven't covered just yet with the guys from the Paratope. There is a lot of things, obviously. The game is pretty complex, as you already know. But let's just start with how are you doing, Justin? How does the closing the Kickstarter campaign that was so crazy with over 340K with over 6,000 backers? How does that feel? How was it? I mean, probably incredible, but I'll let you answer that.
It's been very good in terms of success. We have hit within a 1 percentile of success that was possible based on what I had predicted and planned for. So it was very successful, and it was very eye-opening. We now know that people are ready to play right now, the current state of the game in pre-alpha, which was not something we were expecting. Our momentum has now picked up quite a bit, so I think that that's probably the most exciting thing about the Kickstarter, is that things don't seem to be slowing down at all. We're getting more and more people excited about the game every day, more and more curators jumping on the board, press, and also just gamers alike all coming together, just saying, hey guys, let's just play this game right now. So that's been probably the biggest impact of the Kickstarter, has just been the sheer momentum.
Yeah, I can imagine. We've seen a lot of people just joining the Discord, and like the community has grown exponentially in the last couple of weeks, which is pretty incredible. But I guess obviously with a huge success, a lot of people will probably be wondering, what are you guys going to be doing with the money that comes off the Kickstarter? Are you guys buying a house, a supercar? Are you is Stages retiring, or like what's the plan here? What are you guys planning on doing right now with all this money that's flown into the company?
Well, really the first thing is hardware and production. So we're going to be getting a couple more 3D printers and setting them up with a multicolor printing pipeline, where we'll be able to infuse multiple material types into a single print. And that's going to be relatively inexpensive, actually. All of the printers that we want to get and the actual adapters, the multicolor, will cost us under $5,000. And then we want to get some more GPUs and PC hardware for our servers. So hopefully we get a deal with NVIDIA. They're going to get us 6 cards, and we're probably going to purchase them in bulk and get some servers set up, as well as development machines. And then we begin the process of hiring, and we're probably going to be outsourcing very little, honestly. And that's the nice thing about what we've done, is that we can remain lean and focus more so on growing the community and the ability for the community to have access to the game, because that's an expensive feat in and of itself. For example, server time, we're working with Multiplay to do our servers, and we're going to start out with a free box, basically, but that's only going to be for a certain amount of people. It might only be 20 people at a time. From there, we might have to spend $1,000 a month, $500 a month, just to have a couple servers online for everybody. And then on top of that, we also have to look at the analytics, QA, and curation of the game, and that's all expensive. So, I mean, it's not extremely expensive, but for analytics, that could be, we were just talking to Unity about that, and to do a real, intense round of analytics, that could easily cost us $1,000 a month or less, or slightly less, like $800 a month, just so that we can have all the analytics suite and a support person for basically it's like an ML agent. It's a machine learning agent that will learn how everyone's playing, and then we can determine what we should do with the build. And licensing that is expensive. The servers are moderately inexpensive. And then we have a QA and curation. We have the curator program. We're going to be paying for a lot more ads and also partnerships that we're doing with other curators, the sponsorship program. So in addition to that, we also have our brunt marketing costs, which are our day-to-day ads on Instagram, Facebook, Google, and then after that we have to think about our immediate development needs. So we already have Kiermode, the community member, who has been doing an amazing job already working on the website. We have our moderator team, which we're going to treat you guys with goodies and things like that. So just at at our where we're at right now, we've got a fair amount of recurring expenses that we need to make sure are taken care of first. So we have to budget for the rest of the year for all those bare metal expenses. Servers, analytics, marketing, in-house development, so paying me and Tejas a basic salary so we can survive. We don't have to do anything else to sustain the game. And then also expanding out towards contracted concept art, for example, and then we have like Cure Mode working as the intern. So there are a couple of things that we want to then look for when we actually outsource. And that's we want to get most value for our money, and we also want to get a team that has a lot of experience. So we're probably going to be subcontracting a whole team of people from another development house. We're not sure which one we're going to go with yet. We may go directly with Unity. We're actually, since we're working with multiplay and Unity Analytics, they have a tool that another company they acquired. So we're already working with Unity. And they have a direct pipeline for developers. And that's actually what a lot of other developers are doing now. Once they get big with Unity's engine, they actually work with Unity directly. It's not cheap, but you can get really good talent. So we're looking at a couple of options. But the nice thing is, since I and Tejas and I, have created the entire game over the last couple of years, we don't really need to hire anyone immediately. We can actually just continue at the current pace, invest in those other things like the infrastructure of the company, the actual growth and sustaining factors of the website, e-commerce portion of the business as well, because there are recurring fees with e-commerce, not only the advertising but also the shipping and fulfillment. There are transactional fees, so just make sure all that's taken care of, and then we can take our time and get, I don't know, a whole team, 8 people, for a specific amount of time doing exactly what we need them to do, because a big part of our roadmap is iterative development and quick testing. That's why there's 8 rounds of the pre-alpha, and even within each round there's a lot of different steps. That's why you guys are always seeing new builds, you're seeing new gameplay, you're seeing new screenshots, because I can just open up a new, like a new continent, for example, or even a new biome, just a biome on itself, and I've got all these different things that I can showcase in terms of the Sentius, the actual biome generation itself, the classes that are featured in that dynasty. And I'm going on a little bit of a rant, but the point is that we do have to be conscious that if we just spend all of the money immediately, like we just hire up immediately, we get 10 people working on the game, and we just start burning cash, and we're not really aware of what's most valuable at the current state of the game, we could waste a lot of money. So we'd rather let everyone play quickly, take that information, and then accurately hire exactly who we need to get exactly what we want done. That's basically the idea with that.
All right. I mean, yeah, that sounds way better than you guys just buying a house or a supercar, but and Tejas retiring, obviously. But I think a lot of people already kind of knew about that, because you guys already had a couple of interviews like this. So I guess I actually just wanted to dive in really quickly into the storyline of the Skyclimbers and the premise, and like tell us about the Shoei and Void, like what is their role in the world, just kind of to steer away the discussion from the actual technicality of the world, of the life, and then actually going to the game, because I think people are more interested into what's in the game rather than what you guys are going to be doing on the back end. But yeah, what's the role of the Void Shoei in the world? How will they interact between each other? And then at the end of the day, what is going to be our role in the game, in both PvE and PvP, with those two allegiances or factions?
It's a good question. So I just added a new segment in the Discord. It says, react to the following with the rules. Essentially, you're acknowledging that the rules are not able to be broken, and then you're becoming a sentinel, and you're noticing everyone's getting the role sentinel. So this basic term is used to describe any being that it enforces the will of the Shoei, and specifically the Shoei elders. Now they are an ancient Type 3 alien civilization that has the capability of warp gates, so time and space travel, the ability to shift between dimensions, and also to synthesize life mechanically. That's why you have Rector or the little Sentinel drones that are highly mechanized, and the temples, which are very ancient but also highly advanced looking in their architecture and technology. So you could look at these peoples as almost like the forerunners from Halo. They're very advanced, very ancient, and they seed life throughout the galaxy. So all life that has been mechanized, all the Sentius that have been mechanized, all the buildings that have been mechanized, those are all of the Shoi's creation. And also, the buildings around the star system, they are not only present in an ancient sense where they've been planted prior, but they're also deployed actively. That's why in the story trailer you notice that the warp gates all essentially snap in to the planetary ring. And then they deploy the fragments, which are those devices that launch the drones when they hit the ground. And then, so they will in real time adapt to what the void is doing. So if the void were to erupt out of a new black hole, or a portal that they were to open in a star system, which we are currently in one star system of an undisclosed amount. And in this star system, what happens is the void first arrives on Hex, which is the moon of Lythan, the basic core planet. And from there, the Shoi respond because it had spread to Lythan, which is why you see Lythan with the primary planet is covered in the purple void. So at this point, the Shoi intervene regardless of what star system this takes place in. So if it takes place in this star system, that's just another. It's like another day of the week for the Shoi. They send their warp gates, they deploy the fragments, the drones reactivate the temples, and they draw people in. They draw living beings into their temples or relics. They have various buildings, also the terminus access points. So there are various buildings that they spread at a certain ratio. So every continent has a certain amount of every Shoi building, because they seed them throughout the entire star system as a backup. It's a lifeline. So that if the void should ever show up at one of these locations, they can activate a temple, they can deploy the warp gates, they can activate the sentinels, which would be, in this case, anyone who puts the Sentius gauntlet on. Once you put the gauntlet on, you can't take it off. It's kind of a trap almost that they give you as a gift. It seems as almost like a gift of power, but the Sentinels realize that they are actually unable to even separate themselves from the technology. So,
all right.
So that's essentially how your faction choice takes place. Do you want to support the Shoi and their allegiance to order and compliance and peace and orderliness in general? Or do you want to have disorder and go with the void and be very chaotic, and instead of accepting the Sentius gauntlet, you would literally become infected with the void, so to speak. So you would ingest the void parasite and embrace it, and then you would just be able to dynamically shift into void forms or control void Sentius or infect Sentius or infect the environment. And the core difference is that instead of constructing, you're deconstructing. When you're the Shoi, you're constructing temples. If you're playing as a Sentinel, you're constructing pyramids. You're constructing all of these core buildings that allow you to fast travel, clear the area of void, also mark beacons, respawn locations. And then eventually getting into planetary and interplanetary travel through the warp gates. Because essentially once you connect enough pyramids, you can then connect warp gates, and then you can warp between planets. That's essentially how you'll be able to move between planets. And if you were to go the void tech tree, or the void allegiance, instead you would be building actual portals or black holes in this case. And those black holes would act as your temples. And then instead of finding fragments, you would find actual, essentially areas of the map that are infected with the void. And that's acting as your lowest level entry point to the tech tree. Whereas the lowest level entry point to the tech tree for the Shoi is the fragments, because the fragments will show up anywhere. Any biome, you can always find a fragment. Once you find it, you extract the skill point. Same with the void. You find a void infestation anywhere. If you're on the void allegiance, you can extract a skill point from that. So while those actual specifics aren't set in stone, that's the general sense of how it functions. And in the mid to late game, you can see how on a void side, you have the whole map infected with void. You have all the Sentius are infected with void. All of your Sentius are infected with void. All your villagers are infected with void. You have giant parasitic creatures that are like sucking off the land and giving you energy. And then if you are at the same point in the tech tree for the Shoy, you have a lush kingdom, and then you have lots of free roaming wildlife and Sentius, and then you have lots of orderly structures like temples and relics and terminus points, and then eventually even building like large force fields to protect yourself from the void. So they're fundamentally the same in many ways, because you get access to the same types of features: fast travel, larger spread of your domain, the ability to travel between planets. So these basic progression tree elements maintain exactly the same, but the visual style and the actual play style can vary quite a bit.
All right, I think that kind of cleared up the air about Shoy and Void and how that's gonna work. What I was actually curious about, and this is something that we talked about quite a lot, when will we actually encounter Void Lords? If I play PvP and I'm a Shoy, when will I actually encounter a Void Lord with its army or with its following or whatever else that's going to be happening in the world? When will I actually be able to see them?
So you will encounter... Can you guys see me still? I think I moved the camera a little bit.
Yeah, you moved a little bit, but
okay.
I can see now.
Yeah, so the Void Lords will spawn, and the exact conditions aren't set, but what it'll be is if you allow the Void to fester. So if the Void spawns into a part of the map, that small portion of the map will begin to expand, and the wildlife in that... So, for example, like the trees and whatnot will begin to corrode and die in that area, and then after a long enough time, it'll open up a void portal, kind of like another portal, and then Void Lords will start coming through it, and then they'll actually expand, and they'll go and seed other parts of the map.
Right, so the void actually, the infection actually is not going to be spreading around unless the portal is open.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Right,
so
right.
if you find it early, you can put an end to it, and it's done.
Cool. So it's a matter of trying to chase it and trying to get it closed or cleansed as soon as possible.
Yes. You have,
all right.
And also, because if you let it fester and the portal opens, you might go there and the Void Lord isn't even there. He's around the map, or it's just like an anonymous figure is around the map somewhere else spreading it, and you're already too late.
Oh, right. That sounds pretty interesting. So now that we know that we'll be fighting Void, we also mentioned a lot of times opposing clans. We have the Kojin and we have the Yagi at the moment. Obviously, every dynasty will have its own opposing clan. How will that work? When will these clans be fighting us? Will they be attacking our kingdoms? How are we going to defend against them effectively? And can they actually tear apart our kingdom and like we have to start over, or just like they cleansed us as opposed to us cleaning the clans or whatever?
So how this will work is that when you build your first village and you establish your base, they will also spawn a base. And this will happen every time you build a base. Now, they can spawn randomly in any biome, the same way that you can come across any mob in, for example, like, actually, I would say the best thing is in Minecraft, the pillagers. So, anytime a village spawns, a pillager village also spawns. So, it's the same way here. Every time you spawn a complete village, and you actually establish a base, because there's a difference between building a house and establishing a base. There's going to be a core building, like a hearth or the exact building terminology will vary based on the dynasty, but that building slot will establish your base, and it will spawn in this enemy base, and they will follow a very similar path of tech tree. So they will build more houses, they will spawn more units. If you do not take care of them, they will start to expand, and they will, essentially, you could look at it as when you have your village automated, and your villagers are going and cutting down trees and doing that kind of thing, the AI will do the same thing. So it's like playing an RTS against the AI. And if you do defeat them, they will stop spawning from that location. But they can always pop up in a new location. So the balance here for the player is that in order to deal with them, you have your own units. So that's why you have the ability to train one of the 5 different unit classes, which we're still deciding upon. They're not set in stone, but they would be the warlocks, the champions, which would be like heavy armors, the knights, which would be more light armors, the geez, the Rangers, or not the Rangers, the Archers, and then there was one more that I can't recall. But essentially, you have 5 different unit classes. Oh, the Tamers. So the war,
Tamers,
and each class that we have has a specific subclass that their units can have. So you'll be able to train multiple types of units regardless of which class you pick. But if you pick, for example, the war class, you'll be able to train Tamers in addition to being able to train basic soldiers. So the specialty class acts as an addition to your basic classes for the units. And then for the ability to defend your base, you'll also have the ability to create like archer towers, very tower defense-esque, and also the ability to create barriers like walls and actual physical gates that the enemies cannot get through unless they break the gates. And there will be fully destructible environments, so you'll be able to destroy, let's say you build a base using the free building system. If the enemies come near you and they start bombarding your base and they have siege weapons or explosives, they could potentially break through to your base, yes.
Cool. All right, that sounds pretty interesting. And can they actually wipe out our kingdom? Like, let's say they've managed to get through. Can they actually wipe us out?
Well, theoretically, yes. I don't know if we'll actually go down that route, though. They're really not designed to be the focus of the game. They're just designed to keep the game exciting at all times and keep you on your heels, so to speak. You know, we have the void, between the void and the native clan. We want to always keep you on your heels if you stay in one spot. Now, if you just keep moving and you're a nomad, you'll probably never have a problem with either faction, the void or the native opposing clan, unless you stay up at night, because at night we're going to increase the void spawn rate.
Right. And will these void then eventually like disappear by the morning, or what's the
the void lings, which will be lower tier void Sentius or just void enemy AI that are lower than the void lords, they will spawn at night and then shrivel up during the day. The void lords, though, I'm not sure exactly. They may just be fine during the day because they're a more finalized form of the void. So that's still to be determined, but those two systems will also all of the systems are cross interactive. So like if you have villagers in your kingdom, and you could theoretically have a void raid and a Yagi raid at the same time. You see what I'm saying? Or like you could like you could be being chased by a void lord back to your base and then have a Yagi raid happen.
That sounds pretty hectic and crazy. But as you said, it's gonna keep us on our toes, and like we always have to be careful what's going on and always be ready. I guess we kind of went through pretty much everything that I was curious about the void, at least for now. Obviously, guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We have people who know exactly what they need to answer to those. We have the ambassadors and mods in the chat, so feel free to pop them in. I guess one of probably the most interesting aspects of the whole game, aside from the monster taming, obviously, is the combat, because we already mentioned a lot of times it's going to be player and Sentius side by side. We've seen how that's going to look like when you're fighting as a player versus the Sentius, and we've seen how that's going to, at least a simulation of it, we've seen when you're actually mounted on the Sentius. But how is that going to look like when you're side by side? How are you going to be actually controlling your Sentius while executing your maneuvers and like attacks?
Right. So this is something we're going to be showing very soon. We have balancing a lot of different builds right now. But to give you a basic idea is that you have probably a basic of 3 behavior sets that your Sentius will be able to use. So you could look at those as like moves. One move might be a melee attack. One move might be a ranged attack. And then one move might be a support attack that raises your defense or something like that. Now, those 3 attacks will cycle. Those are 3 moves. So the Sentius will just be using those 3 moves on an AI pool with cooldown. So if one of them has a higher cooldown, it'll be used less, and the Sentius will be patrolling around the enemy and attacking when able. And then you'll have free use of your attacks, so you'll be able to use your attacks as much or as little as you want. And then if you have different items, equip different items, all in real time. So the only thing that's not real time is the actual move set, because you're leveling your Sentius and you're picking a move set, just like any other monster tamer. Every time they level up, you can only have a certain amount of moves, so you have to either get rid of old moves or add a new one. So in this case, you're just letting the Sentius execute those moves on an AI cooldown, and the only thing that we could do is potentially change which move is favored. So like in real time, you might be able to switch your Sentius from favoring the support role with the support moves, or switch it to favoring the attacks in real time with a dial or something. Now, to be clear, that's not built. That's something we discussed, is how we would increase the complexity. As of right now, though, they're following you. You can mount them and use them directly in combat, or you can just dismount and start fighting the enemy, and they will take on a basic AI behavior and begin to fight the enemy.
All right, that sounds pretty interesting. I can't wait to actually see the showcase of that. Now, obviously, then we get to a point. What happens when we are doing that, when we are unmounted, and we actually get across another player with the unmounted Sentius as well? How will that look like? Will we have control of saying my Sentius should attack their Sentius, or will the Sentius decide on its own who they're gonna pick and fight? Or is it actually going to be set in stone, Sentius versus Sentius, and you as a player go against the player?
That's actually a really good question. I think that the ideal scenario here is that you are able to target an enemy with the AI. So you would lock onto an enemy, press a button, and then the AI would select and attack that enemy. In the case of like a duel in a Coliseum, or what we're calling the gyms, or maybe we call them the Coliseums, the battlegrounds, those would be an interesting place to have it be segmented, where you fought the enemy one-on-one and the Sentius fought one-on-one. But in the general open world, we're probably just going to give you the choice that you can pick.
Yeah, all right, that sounds interesting. And then I guess, is there team fire? So if we go into the allegiance in PvP server, can I actually hurt my villagers, my tamed Sentius, and the other players that are part of my allegiance, and their Sentius and their villagers and whatever?
Oh, I gotta switch the batteries.
Yeah, no worries.
So in that case, what it's going to be most likely is a game mode setting. So, like, that's what I'm thinking, because you definitely have a different style of play when you can do that. I feel like in PvP, and I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, but I do think that in PvP it makes more sense to be able to harm any AI. But in PvE, you have a pretty specific objective, and the only time I could really see you needing to kill your villagers is if you want to decrease population. So in that case, like we've talked about, you would probably just banish, or like you would essentially banish the villagers so that they couldn't stay, and they would leave and disappear, but you wouldn't have to actually kill them, because that introduces some things where you can have a lot of griefing, like your friends are griefing your villagers.
That sounds like an interesting aspect.
Because that would be a really big problem. If someone just killed all your villagers, that can cost you like dozens of hours of gameplay.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in PvP, we will see how that's going to look like, and I assume it's going to be a lot of balancing once we actually get to that point, where you guys will probably see how players are playing and what is the actual bottleneck of people enjoying the game. But since you're talking about enjoying the game, you guys obviously want to stuck within the game for a long time. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours, taming, fighting, building, and everything else. What can we actually expect to keep us glued for that long? What kind of the ongoing or once-off events in-game can we expect? We already said that the opposing clans will attack you. We already said that the Void is going to be there spreading the infection. Is there anything else aside from those two events? And then obviously, how will the endgame look like? What is the endgame content aside from Yagi and Kojin and Void infection? Is there any like specific endgame content? We already said we will have the PvP gyms and PvP arenas, which is pretty cool. Is there anything else that you guys kind of had at the back of your mind for the future and what you could probably use as an endgame content.
Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get this camera going here. Get that adapter. So, the first thing, as you mentioned, in terms of the end game, is the actual survival and tech tree. So the ability to have your kingdom, your automated villagers, the ability to tame any Sentius that you want because you have the right amount of, you have the best Sentius gauntlet. The other piece is the player progression skill tree, so your class skill tree, which is a very valuable metric for determining how far you've progressed in the game. So you not only have the ability to level up all your Sentius to level 100 and unlock all of their moves, but you also have the ability to actually take your player to level 100, and then you can do that 5 times through every class. So really, I think that the thing to determine playtime and how we can really guarantee 5 or 10 years of a roadmap is that we have the ability to take every new system that we add to the game and multiply it not by 1 factor, but by 3 or 4. So first you multiply the opportunities for a unique experience with the classes. So like you have 5 classes, so 5 times 5 biomes per continent per dynasty. Then you have, let's say, 6 playable dynasties over the next 3 years. Then you have 6 times 5 times 5 of unique starting conditions. So that's 5 times 5 is 25, times 6, that's 150. So you have 150 starting conditions in the next 3 years. And we're going to start with not all of those. We're going to have only 4 dynasties. So in the 3-year point, we'll have 150 conditions. But then from there, you also have all of the Sentius combos. So you have the ability to then pick 4 Sentius. Out of those 4 Sentius, you're now looking at 4 times 150 for starting conditions. So 4 times 150 is 400, 600, if I'm not mistaken. That's 600 starting conditions. Then, from there, you also have new classes that we may add. I mean, we've already heard a bunch of ideas for new classes. I think we have a great opportunity to increase the amount of classes in the game because not only do we have different play styles, but we have people who are going to RP or create their own play styles. And for example, the tamers, like even though it's a city building game, we have all these people that are really interested in doing the tamer play style. So we have a whole set of tamer oriented classes that we can add. A beastmaster, a mounted taming class. So I do think that once you take into consideration the scale of all of the game systems, you take into consideration the class system, the biome system, the procedurally generated biome system, the fact that there is no theoretical limit to how many Sentius we can add because they're procedurally generated in the same way using that 3-step AI structure that will not change. So at the end, you're looking at well over 600 combinations of a 3-year roadmap. Then from there, you have the custom game modes, blueprints, and community-created content, the community roleplay servers, the dedicated Draconian server, the dedicated Rakuhito servers, the Monster Taming League, the Racing Leagues. You have so many communities that are already invested in the game, that are ready to make their own narratives, create their own experiences, make their own content. And then on top of all of that, we also have cross-play and cross-save, which means that we can age with technology. Rather than being tied down and saying, oh, well, we're going to stick to VR only, or we're going to do, only next-gen consoles, or we're only going to do cloud, we're doing all of them and trying to build our engine around that so that anytime a new platform comes out, that's the new hot platform, we can just take our engine and just produce a build for that platform. And it doesn't become a big headache thing where we're like, oh, this new platform, it takes us all this time and money just to get the game on the new platform. Then that platform's abandoned in 3 years. We have to switch platforms and spend more money. So keeping all platforms in check when we designed the engine and when we took all of the features that we wanted to have for the game, we said, well, let's rethink that so that they can be optimized for our target platforms. After doing all of that, we really have future-proofed the engine. I keep saying engine. we've future-proofed the platform integrity of the game. That's really what we've done. Because we started with VR and we went to then think about mobile and Switch architecture, and if you go down all the way to Switch and mobile architecture, it's all scaling up. So the fact that we can use our essentially a very similar code base, we do have to make, I won't say I may, we do have to make specific builds for different platforms at this time, but since we've chosen Unity, which is the most platform agnostic engine, in time it's very likely that we're going to reach parity where all platforms are button press, because we've chosen Unity. And you already see that with consoles, where consoles are literally a button press, and then the build is created for a lot of consoles. I think we got a little lag here. Let me check.
Yeah, can you guys hear us good on the stream? I think I heard you.
There was just a little lag.
Cool. I mean, that sounds great. I've already heard that, so I have another question. And this one is actually from the community. Severance Bain on the Discord actually asked me to ask this question is there any reason why you should ever go to PvP if you're playing PvE? Like, is there going to be any better resources, Sentius, or anything similar to actually push you to take your character and your Sentius to the PvP server?
I would say no, at this time, no. And in fact, we really do want to encourage you to, even when you're playing PvP, to not consider it as an all-out war. Like, you just have to kill every, it's not like you just have to immediately participate and kill every other Void player. So, I do think that we're going to try and maintain PvE as the target for the game, and make sure that anything that is added to PvP is available in PvE.
Fair enough. All right. Obviously, there's a lot of aspects of the survival. What can we see? Food, water, weather influence. What's the idea here, and how actually it's going to influence our gameplay?
Okay, good question. So we like to look at it as a lighthearted version of survival. So eating will be optional. Like, I guess you could take, like, for example, in Breath of the Wild, it's almost a survival type of a loop with the food, where you do have to cook to survive, and you do have to be able to get food and be able to know some basic recipes, especially if you want any bonus, like a stat boost. But you don't necessarily need to do it. You could just kind of just die every time you lose your health and respawn and get your stuff back. So in the same way, your stuff, we're going to try and do our best, and even as early as possible, make it so that when you drop your items, they stay there as long as ever, until you go back and you go find them. So that's the idea, so that it's not as punishing. Now, this is something that I think can be scaled very much down to the game modes. For example, in the normal game mode, it will be very, very user-friendly, and the survival will only enhance the gameplay. So you're basically looking at one metric, which is hunger. And similar to Minecraft, that hunger bar won't go down unless you lose health. So as long as you have full health and you're fed, you don't have to worry about hunger at all. But if you cook and you farm and you have farmers, you can use those outputs to either cook or consume directly, and that'll be a good thing for you. And then in terms of weather systems, the weather systems are relatively standard. I mean, there's going to be rain. We already have rain. We have cloudy. We have day. Those are really more atmospheric, though. They're more about changing the sound effects, the visual effects, the music in some cases. And we may introduce some things like slipperiness when it's wet, when it's raining. But other than that, we're trying to keep it so that a lot of the real-time survival elements are just to keep it real. We want to make sure that you stay in tune with the scale of the world, and that you're really aware of how meaningful each biome is, because you want to make use of these biomes. They're so giant and vast. You want to be in a biome, become immersed with it, learn about how to survive in every biome. Learn about the best places to hide in every biome. Learn about the best places to get resources in every biome. Then you can really appreciate all of the scale and detail we've put into the world. Because if you just don't have any survival components, and you just are able to run around indefinitely and explore, you'll exhaust the continent, let's say in, I don't even know how, because we're still scaling them, but let's say it took you 12 hours to scale the continent uninterrupted, just walking end to end. That's a reasonable number. But if you were doing a survival game loop and you had to survive, it might take you 100 hours to scale the whole continent, because you now have to take into effect the ability to build a base, the ability to not get raided, the ability to expand. And also, once you build a base, you're going to be comfortable, and the further you get from your base, the less comfortable you're going to be. So I think that survival is a very important piece of any survival game that wants to emphasize on scale and procedural generation, and any game in general. Because when a game is finite and it's not survival, it makes sense. You can run through the map and you're full of things to do the whole time. But when it's more open and the map scale is so much larger, you need to have a real meaning behind all the decisions you make. And that's also why. That's also, I want to touch upon that. I know we might touch upon this later, but also essence. Essence was something I really pushed for with the game, because the biggest problem with a lot of survival game loops is that they're so grindy, they don't reward the basic game loop mid-game. Mid-game, if you have to build a house, you're like, oh man, I have to build a house. Or, oh man, I have to build a crafting table. It's like you've built it 100 times, you're so done with it. So to go out and actually get wood to build that crafting table is torture. So by adding essence, every time you chop wood, you have the ability to find essence. You might be able to find Gaia essence. And depending on what biome you're in, I was thinking earlier today, it would make sense if you were mining or wood cutting in a specific biome, you could just come across, let's say, magma essence if you're in the Draconian dynasty. So your dynasty could always have a buff for the locale of what essence you get. Now this is very it's completely untested, unbalanced. I don't know of any games that even do this. So we have to figure out how we implement the essence, but I do think that the essence can save the survival game loop and make it very fun and rewarding.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I already, like we already discussed the essence, and I think it's a pretty good way of allowing you to actually rewarding you for your mining. Just going around the world and trying to gather the resources and whatever, because usually games are pretty boring when you need to go out and chop dudes for like 3 hours.
Exactly.
To be able to build whatever.
Exactly.
All right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please. What we're going to discuss next, and also the camera's being finicky. So if you guys are all right, I'm going to keep that picture there for now. I might try to something else in a second.
Yeah. I think everyone's fine. Nobody said anything in the chat so far.
Okay.
I actually have the next couple of things scoped into their own kind of areas. We have kingdoms, Sentius, classes, and characters, and then we're gonna jump more into the focused community questions. There's been a lot of things that people want to get the answers to. So let's kick things off with the kingdoms and talk about the actual eras that the kingdoms will go through. How is this going to affect our kingdom? We already know that we're going to be getting the access to different buildings, and our AI might actually get stronger or whatever the defenses. How is this actually going to look like? What do people have to do to go from one era to the other, and what will they be getting once they actually upgrade the era, once they go through village to the next era?
Very good question. So the thing to remember here is that your buildings will only the complexity of the buildings you can create will go as far as the era you have reached. So just to break down what that means, let's say every building has a tier. You can only reach tier 1 with village. Now the basic buildings are available at almost every tier. So at tier 1 you have your farmer, your miner, your merchant, and the ability to build a barracks to recruit soldiers. Now when you reach the next era, you can now upgrade all of those buildings. So they can all become farmer level 2.
Right.
Mason level 2. So you basically keep all of the same buildings. We're going to probably add one new building type each era. So like maybe at the second era you get a fisherman, and then at the third era you get a trader. I mean, those are very basic buildings. But then from there we're also going to have a tree where you can acquire new buildings or new specialties. So this will be handled through your core building. There will be a kind of a kingdom council room where you're able to visually see the skill tree for your kingdom. You'll be able to say like, okay, I'm at village XP 500 out of 10,000. These are completely random numbers. And at this stage, I have access to lumber mill, mine, trader, merchant, and the farmer. Now, if I get to halfway leveled to the next era, I might unlock a new building. Now I can hire hunters. So once you've unlocked all the buildings, you then are going to level up the buildings themselves. But to unlock all the buildings, you have to make it to the 4th era, which is a kingdom.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense now. All right, I guess the next part is, we already mentioned about the defending your kingdom and how we will have to try to defend against either the opposing clans or other players. Will there be actual turrets or any type of things like that for the defense? And this was actually asked by the Legacy community on Discord. They also asked if there will be any archer towers. I know that we mentioned that, but I'll let you lead the word on this.
Quick question. Well, first, was that a Legacy? What do you mean Legacy? What's the Legacy community?
It's the Nemesis and Saga guys who are coming from.
Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah. Could you repeat the question one more time? What was
will there be any turrets to defend?
Oh, yes. And so that's what I was saying before with the archer tower. You'll have the ability to build an archer tower, and essentially the archers will never leave the tower. You see what I'm saying? So it'll be like a turret, and then from there, you'll eventually be able to add things like a ballista. You know, like it's like a giant crossbow. You'll be able to put these big anti-siege weapons on your kingdom. Those are going to be later in the era, though. At the 1st era, you only have access to building like an archer tower and barracks in the walls. From there, you'll be able to actually mount the walls, probably in the 2nd era or the 3rd era.
Right, so depending on how you progress through the eras, that's the amount of defense that you'll be getting, which kind of makes sense.
Correct.
Another question from the same guys, the Legacy community, so Nemesis, Saga, and all the guys that have joined from that Discord. Will there be more upgrades than what, for example, we know right now that each of the classes has access to a certain specific building? Will my class of a Ranger be able to do something else aside from that within the buildings? Will I be able to upgrade, I don't know, another building to specific Ranger type building? Or is it just specific access to archer towers or whatever the specific Ranger class building is?
Right, so we touched on this just a second before, but yes, so when you pick a class, you'll have the ability to have a unique building. But that doesn't mean you can't hire basic other unit classes. Now, the basic unit class will be a soldier corresponding with your class, most likely. So like if you build the basic barracks, that will be, if you pick the Ranger class, you'll be able to spawn archers. That's your basic barracks. But then it would make sense for you to be able to acquire the blueprints to build the other class units. Now, how we distribute that, I do not know.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're still pretty early in development, so none of these are strictly set in stone, and a lot of things can be changed or shifted around, so just keep that in mind, guys. I guess I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to sum it up in one so we can actually move to the next section, which is how will we interact with the other kingdoms? So let's say I meet another AI kingdom. Will they be able to be set, or a player's kingdom, will they be able to set their defenses on to be like passive, neutral, or aggressive? And if they're passive, how will I be able to go in and actually do the trade with their merchants and blacksmiths or whatever? And what actually could I do within somebody else's or AI kingdom aside from just attack them?
Okay, good question. So AI kingdoms are probably going to start out like a Minecraft village where you cannot hurt them really. I mean, you can go and start like attacking them, but they're not gonna fight back. So they're really there to act as trade allies, and I think the most logical thing is to be able to just buy them outright. So like if you have enough currency, you can just buy a whole kingdom and add it to your whole empire. And I think that's honestly the most promising thing, because like it's almost like shopping. Like they're gonna spawn randomly. We have no control over the exact way that it's gonna look because it's gonna be procedurally generated. But if you come across some kingdom you really like, it's like, I kind of like this, and then you grind it out till you have an insane amount of money to just buy it and then add it to your whole domain. And then lower than that would be like a trade, which is very doable, where you basically would build a basic trade relationship, and then every turn or every season or year. Because there's a day and night cycle. We'll probably eventually integrate seasons and a yearly cycle, so that you can have a yearly calendar that progresses so that some parts of the year are more prosperous, some are less prosperous, and then each year you'll be able to consistently every month get a rate of return on this trading investment. So that's pretty similar to any kingdom management game, and that'll take place purely through UI, where you find this new kingdom, you find the character, the lord, or the emperor, or not the emperor, but the king, or the highest level of nobleship in that dynasty's settlement, and then from there you would make the trade agreement, and then you would automatically see those resources go into your fictional bank account in this case.
Interesting. And then I guess against the players, if we are on PvP, is there a way for us to be on a friendly note without the allegiance? Obviously, once you're in allegiance, we pretty much can share most of the things. But if I'm a player playing on PvP and you are on the other side of the world, and I bump into your kingdom, is there a way for you to say, I want to be a passive kingdom, and I'll let you walk in, do the trade with my merchants, blacksmiths, and whatever, and then see you later, whatever, or put it on neutral, and unless you don't start a war, I don't care, you can walk through, you can do whatever the business you want with my merchants?
That's a good question. I would say that would most likely make sense if what we did was we took the actual kingdom management setting and we allowed you to pick whether you wanted to be open to trade relations. And then if you were open to trade relations, someone could send you essentially an envoy or an in-mail without actually entering your kingdom. And then if you, through proximity or something like that, and then if you accepted it, they'd be able to enter your kingdom and do the trade.
That would be pretty cool. Cool. All right. Now that we got kingdoms out of the way, I don't want to get stuck in any of the topics for too long because we've been going for quite some time right now, and there's still a lot of things that I'm curious about and the community asks. Let's jump into the Sentius. How many in total for full release? Just quickly.
400. 400.
Cool. Any plans to add more after the full release, like Gen 2, Gen 3, or is it just going to be the iterative? Like, oh, we added 5 more, we added 10 more, or are you going to plan to do like a gen?
It'll be dynasty based. 100 per dynasty.
Sweet. All right. If there is another question from the legacy community, they've kind of touched base on most of the categories here. So I'm just popping in a couple more questions from them. If Sentius don't have the stat points where they can where we can breed to make them perfect, what benefits breeding actually has? Like, what's the purpose of the breeding except just trying to get the astral? And we already know that the percentage for that is lower than actually finding in the wild.
So the first reason that you might want to breed is actually resource production. So some Sentius can be farmed. Now, that means you literally could be farming Zabura for meat.
Right.
And essence, even. You could be farming them for essence. So that's a basic way that Sentius have value to produce, even common Sentius. Now, from there, you also have variation. So let's say you catch an Embryo. Now, we're going to allow for the variation of size and hue. So when you breed, you might get a different hue of the colors.
Right.
And a slightly different size. So I think that there are some things that do make breeding worthwhile, even if there's no stats. Now, once we throw the stats into the equation, we are going to have randomized stats. So whenever you level up a Sentius, they have a base lean based on their initial stats. So if you look at if you look at our last image we did of the Maguma tree, I think it's in game info. It's the one we use all the time. That's the actual UI for what the Sentius' skills look like. So when they spawn, they have a certain level for those 3 attributes, and those are worthwhile to get if you keep breeding and you want to get a specific lean.
Interesting. All right, that sounds pretty interesting. All right, we already touched base on the combat. When can we expect to see player Sentius unmounted combat to be showcased?
Oh, it's got to be within a couple of days. I mean, there's so many builds that are happening right now. Just so you guys know. I mean, we have Sasha's build with all the monster taming. So we have the ability to tame Sentius with the gauntlet, deploy them, fight with them. It's a little rough still, so we're working on that. We have Kimura's build with Paladin combat and then the Rakuhito City, and then has all the features Sasha had with the climbing and whatnot. Then we have Hotaru's build where all the survival elements are in. So it's all with these different characters. They're all coming together real soon. Real soon, you're going to see every single character has access to all mechanics. And then after that, you guys get to play.
All right, that sounds pretty interesting. This is also another one from the community. Will we be able to mount, unmount on command? For example, if I'm in the air and I, let's say, unmount my Sentius and pull it back into my gauntlet, and then I mount in the air to my swimming Sentius, and then I splash into the water. Would that be something that's a possibility, or do I actually have to land and then?
No. It should be dynamic. It should be no different than pulling out your paraglider in Batwa.
Sweet. All right. And then, since we touched base on the flying, how are we going to catch the flying Sentius in the air? Is it going to be like Ark, where I need to knock it down to the ground, or am I going to be try to chase it around the map, or can I actually sneak behind it and try to tame it, or like what's the actual flying Sentius tame mechanic?
I think that for flying Sentius, one of the things you will be able to do would be find the nest, because we are going to have nests spawn for specific Sentius, and locating an egg, or
right.
So locating an egg from a nest is one way, and then training it up. So like catching lower level ones that can't fly that high also, because the lower level flying Sentius aren't going to, fly off 1,000 feet in the air. They're going to fly up into a tree or something, so it'll be easier to catch them.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then also once you have a flying Sentius, you'll be able to, it's basically a gun, the Sentius Gauntlet, so you'll be able to shoot them when you're flying. It shouldn't prohibit you from doing that. It won't be so easy, but you should be able to do it.
Right. All right. Of the Sentius topic, let's go to the classes. We already mentioned that we have Warg and Engineer coming in thanks to the crazy Kickstarter campaign, but what type of guns can we expect for the Engineer?
So the Engineer, in terms of projectiles, they'll be steampunk. So they'll be late technological era of the colonial period musket technology. And then if you have the Shoei, so every legendary weapon, the Shois will be more like a plasma rifle though, because it's a futuristic weapon. So every class has a legendary weapon, which is sci-fi. And like you've seen, Kimura's weapon is the legendary paladin sword for Rakuhito. So it has, I'll actually pull that image up if you guys want to just bear with me for a second. So like here you can see in Kimura's sword, she's got this huge sci-fi looking sword. So that's her legendary weapon at the final tier. It's maxed out. Now Ikaru, in my picture, Ikaru doesn't even have any weapon out. He's just got the Sentius Gauntlet on. But that's because he's a mage, so mages don't have to actually equip weapons. They can equip gauntlets. So he's using the Sentius Gauntlet in this case. But he would have a legendary staff that he could equip, or a legendary gauntlet. It'll most likely be a staff since we use the Sentius Gauntlet. And also, can we just say, like, guys, let's freaking play this game. This looks amazing, guys.
Yes, please.
This looks crazy. I'm really happy with how this came out, guys.
Yeah, that screenshot looks pretty sick, I'm not gonna lie. And if you guys missed the Griffin, make sure to check the Discord. If you want to pop it there, you can pop the screenshot of the Griffin. It looks pretty sick. And while we're on the topic of the Engineer as well, what type of mines and traps will they be able to deploy?
Okay, very good. I would say, so one of the things also that would be really nice would be for the flying Sentius would be the ability to trap them. So I think that traps could be interesting for the Engineer, but more interesting even would be like Batwa style bombs that you could drop and they'll roll or they'll stick to the ground. I think bombs are really good. And yeah, I think bombs, also like deployable force fields would be cool.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Like a Halo style deployable force field would be awesome.
And would other classes be able to buy the blueprints for these traps and use them?
So if we were to do a trap for Sentius, it would have to be like a literal trap, like a crate that they get baited into. We could do baiting. I think also, I forgot to say before, when you do that, you can allow you can allow the Sentius to be baited. We're going to allow that. So if you want to try and get like a flying Sentius, you could bait them and then catch them.
That sounds cool. All right, on to the next class, which is Warg. Can Warg actually turn into Sentius and carry other players like regular Sentius do?
Can they turn... Oh, so like we saw with the picture with Akata, where like Warg into a Sentius and put a Sentius on your back?
No, not the Sentius, the actual other player. So like, can other player mount?
Oh, that's really cool. That sounds awesome. I would love to be able to do... I think it makes a lot of sense because it's almost like getting into someone's vehicle.
Yeah, all right.
So I think you probably... I'm going to say most likely, actually.
Cool. All right, that's all I needed to hear. Let's jump into the next category, which is going to be the character. How will the skill tree work? Like, we already know that you go to the temples to get the skill points, but what are the actual skills that you can level up? Buffs, attacks, passive, how will this work? Is it stat related? Do I have the 3 attacks basic that I just have to level up, or do I have like 20 attacks that I can pick from as I level up as I go through the game lifetime? How is that going to look like?
Okay, so to tackle this, I'm going to pull up a class picture. Just give me a second.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up the Paladin, and I'll move it out of the way here. So when you pick the Paladin class, the first thing that you get access to is the Paladin's legendary weapon. So upon finding your first temple, you get access to your legendary weapon. Now in this case, you have Hotaru is actually using an elemental draconian blade. This isn't even the legendary weapon. This is just a draconian magma dual-handed. So at the bottom left here, you can see there's these 3 item icons. One of them is a glowing blade, which is signifying that the weapon is powered up. It has an increased attack at that time, probably a 2x modifier on a cooldown. In the middle is a defensive boost. So if you hit that boost, your defense is increased by, let's say, 50% for a minute. And then the last one is a deflect, where you're able to deflect projectiles when you're using that power-up. So in addition to that, you have your basic stats. You have your stamina, and you have your health. So your stamina and your health, every time you level up, you're going to be able to put skill points towards your health or your stamina. So like you'll be able to increase your health or your stamina. But those same skill points can be used to increase your attack, defense, or speed. So you have skill points you can spend on any of those attributes, or if you click on this Paladin tree, I'm just going to zoom in. If you click on this Paladin tree, you're going to literally be able to... I'm sorry, I'm covering you, Tom. You'll literally be able to look at this and zoom in, and this is a skill tree, and this is going to go from the bottom of the tip, kind of like in Skyrim with the constellations. So it's going to go from the bottom of the tip all the way up to the top tip, and those are all the skills that you can learn. So the skills that are listed on the left of the screen over here, these bottom 3 skills, they will all exist as points within your actual weapon constellation skill tree. But you'll only be able to have 3 active at a time. You don't lose your old skills though. So if you ever wanted to go lower in the tree and mix and match with older skills you learned, you could equip them. But from level 1 to 100, you'll unlock the entire weapons constellation with all the skills.
Right. So that means that at any point I can mix and match if I want this attack and this buff from whatever time of the game. I can just go in and mix and match on my own. Pick the 3 that I'm using, and that's it.
That's right.
Is it free for all for the 3 spots, or is it buff, defense?
No, free for all. So that's where the players. That's another way that you will be able to play each class differently. Is actually equipping different movesets and spending your skill points on your stats.
Right.
Because so like from level 0 to 100, you only get a certain amount of skill points. You'll get enough skill points that you'll be able to unlock all of the abilities, but you won't be able to max out every stat. At least as of right now. We may change that. As of right now, you won't be able to max out every stat. You'll have to be specific about those decisions.
Right. Which kind of makes sense. You don't want to be full powerhouse. You need to make decisions within the game. All right. Now, since the dynasty is actually possessing a specific element, how does that influence our Sentius? For example, if I went with the Draconian, will that actually influence my Magma Sentius? And will that actually have any influence on the Sentius itself? Will it has the better attacks or better defense or whatever the specific dynasty stat would be?
So the nice thing about this is actually no, it isn't. The only time that it is would be in a case of a combo. Now, we haven't actually developed this, and I haven't even run this by Tejas in any great detail, but I think it would be interesting to have it so that if you wanted to do a joint power-up with a Sentius of the same type as you could have a boost in attack, speed, defense, or any of these attributes for a short period of time. But you could only do it if it was the same type as you.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's TBD, guys. Don't take it too seriously until we get the thumbs up in the future. I guess one thing that kind of bugged me from the beginning when we started talking about the blueprints is, do you buy them once and then learn from them, or do you have to keep them forever and just use them when you build or craft or whatever else you do in the world?
Oh, that's a good question. So no, once you learn a new skill, like once you learn a new blueprint, you learn it, you don't have to ever learn it again. You don't have to, you can,
right.
It's basically just going to go into your like index. If you ever wanted to look back and see the blueprint, that's it, but you've learned it, it's now in your UI wheel and you can build it freely.
And can you then go ahead and sell that blueprint, or is that just a used blueprint? Nobody else can use it after you.
It's a used blueprint. You've learned it. So as of right now, you're going to have to get, like, for example, you're not going to be able to get a blueprint and sell it to your friend. Your friend has to purchase it from a trader in your dynasty.
Right. Makes sense. And then what if I find a blueprint in the wild, whatever type of blueprint, I'm still not able to sell it to you. You still have to go to find it on your own, or go to a kingdom or AI and buy it from them. Cool. Yeah. All right. Now I have a couple of quick yes and no questions, and then I'll jump into the full-on community questions. Just yes and no. Will there be spells or abilities that can alter the ground or environment? For example, making a wall of earth to block the movement, or projectile attacks.
Yes and yes. The only thing is, though, it's not going to dynamically eat away at the earth. You see what I'm saying?
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. Will there be a battle pass or microtransactions in the game?
There will be a season pass, and at this current time there won't be any microtransactions. And if we do introduce them, everything that's introduced as a microtransaction will be introduced to the base game once the season ends.
Cool. All right. We've seen Foryoku have temples, structures, and buildings on floating islands. So obviously we suspect there will be bridges and ways to connect them or whatever. Will the AI pathfinding be good enough to make that possible? Will our AI be able to just connect our different floating islands in the world with whatever? Or is it just an imaginary connection? This is more than a yes and no, but...
That's a little more than yes or no. I would say, in that case, the AI's functionality is, let's just put it this way, it's geometry based, so it's going to be able to process any geometry, whether it's floating or static terrain. In fact, the best way around this is segmenting, so that once, like in this image, you see there's a bridge there.
Yeah.
I think that the AI will most likely be restricted to whatever building that is attached to that land. You see what I'm saying? So like if you build that bridge there, they'll spawn on the bridge and start walking around, but they're not going to leave the bridge.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Let me see what else do I have. Will the legendaries have an evolution of day, lunar, astral, or just the evolutions in general?
So the legendaries will all have 4 forms. They'll have the normal day, lunar, and Luna and Astral. But we have not determined whether they will have pre-evolutions, because they are supposed to be lore specific and have something to do with the elemental nature of a continent, of a dynasty. So it probably wouldn't make sense to introduce that.
Cool. Will we see more classes?
Yes.
can we assign titles to people like king, queen, lords, etc.,
You mean like villagers?
or just people in general, players?
People. I don't know.
As in like have my name, it's Tom, and then above my head.
Oh yeah,
above
nickname.
the
Yes,
title.
yes. You're gonna get a nickname.
Cool.
Yes.
We'll be able to set up shops that other players could buy from. Can we trade items, currency, resources among the other players?
So the shops, yes, but it's removed. So when you build a shop, the other players are interacting with your shop.
Cool. Will mining and farming have chances of dropping any other items, like rare items, or is it just the basic resources?
That's where essence comes in. So you'd be able
Cool.
to get your basic resource and essence.
Alrighty, that's it for the yes/no. I guess we had less yes and no answers and more rant than we expected. But I have a couple more of the community questions that I have here, if you still have time to go through those.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So Meepass from the Discord asked, what have you learned in technical skills in several years building this game?
I would say I learned 3D modeling, I learned 3D painting, I learned concept art, I learned a lot of video editing, I learned shader programming, I learned procedural generation algorithms, I learned basic programming, a lot of stuff. Had to learn a lot of stuff. Learn every day. I'm always learning new stuff.
Cool. And what was one of the most challenging obstacles in building this game, or at least getting it to this point in the game life?
I would say the most challenging part was executing the right feature set for the right market, because you can have a very nice looking game that doesn't make any money, so it's really more so about the market that you're targeting.
Cool. We have Chicken Chaser on Twitter asked, what kind of features can we expect when it comes to the aspect of city building and managing?
The features, not only are you building bases that spawn villagers, but you're also looking at the ability to shift to a top-down RTS perspective and micromanage your kingdom, and be able to look at all of the different statistics that you would see in an RTS or a kingdom management game, like happiness, currency, population. And then a lot of the mid to late game becomes you actually trying to micromanage all of and balance all of your different requirements, like food, resources, and money.
Cool. And then we have Kubricks from the Discord asked, when are you going to start working on Kashimo, and when are we going to see screenshots and gameplay footage from that dynasty?
That'll happen. So what we're going to do is, again, Dynasty weeks are going to go on forever, basically. Until early access, we'll switch to Dynasty months, until we move to Season Pass, where it'll be Dynasty quarters. And the next Dynasty weeks will be Shoei and Void, and then we'll go to Koshimo. So in 3 weeks, we'll do Koshimo, and during that week, you'll get to see gameplay, you'll get to see screenshots, all that stuff.
Awesome. All right. John on Twitter asked, with the new stretch goal of gyms, how will they work? Are they attached to the city planning, so that I actually need to create them, or is this a completely outside world gym that is just somewhere in the void or wherever else, and it's just waiting for us to be warped into it and play there?
So this you can actually access through the world. We want to have them generate with certain Dynasty relationships. So you'll find a Magma gym leader that has Magma Sentius and has Magma Elemental class, and those people who you go against will mirror your class, or mirror your class options. So like they will have, for example. Oh, also I see in this chat, Slepner said looking at other games and what made them successful. I want to see what's going on with the chat here. So one thing I do want to say is that you cannot clone games. That is not a good thing. We did not clone any games. We took inspiration from a lot of different IP. We created something very unique that no other game can offer. That's very important. I think a lot of people who are getting interested in doing the game development think, oh, you just follow a trend, you copy stuff. Yes, to some degree, but no. Because in this image, you can see Aang, you can see Pokemon, you can see, you can see Avatar, the movie, you can see all kinds of influence. But at its core, the game is very fundamentally different than anything that is on the market. And the character that looks like Aang, well, yes, he does look kind of like Aang. He also looks like every other monk that has a magic ability. So I think that that is something that can't be overstated, is how it's not just looking at a success and trying to repeat it. It's actually creating your own IP, your own idea, and that's really what makes you succeed.
Cool. I have another question from Sleipnir. Can we terraform the land for our building purposes?
So right now, the only thing that will happen when you build something is that the trees will despawn, the grass will despawn when you place your buildings, but no, you will not actually deform the ground. That will be restricted only to caves.
Cool. And then, I mean, Legacy community has been one that sent like 25 questions. I have a couple more from them. We're just going to try to cruise through them. How many, if any, rarities will items have?
So items will have rarity, but I don't think that we're going to actually use a property that you see next to the item, like, oh, this is an item of certain rarity. It's just that certain items are less common than other items.
Cool. What kind of a card game can we implement? Can we expect to be implemented in the future?
I couldn't say the actual mechanics of how the card game would function, but it would most likely be based around the Sentius, like Sentius cards.
Cool. We already said that we have the racing game, but is there any other sport type mini games that you guys are thinking, like football, Quidditch, or whatever else?
Wow,
might be out
Quidditch
there?
would be a lot. I think a mounted sport would be really fun. Whether it be Quidditch or some variant of that, I think that would be a ton of fun.
Cool. Sleipnir asked another one. Will there be any way to actually reassign your stats, abilities, points that you've spent previously?
Probably not, because again, it's like how we don't want you to be able to change your element. Just make a new class, make a new build. We don't want you to feel like you have to get tied down to one character.
Cool. We already mentioned that the temples are going to act like dungeons, but will there be specific raids, or are we just looking into the roguelike mode as a way of doing the raids and dungeons?
So the raids, I think that's something that could certainly happen just dynamically in the world. Like I was saying, you might get raided by the Yagi one day. Or you might get raided by a bunch of Void Lords.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think those are the overworld raids you're looking for. And then in terms of dedicated dungeon raids, those will all be in the temples.
Interesting. Pretty interesting. How will the cooking look like in the game? Is it going to be just the basic, or will it be more like profound, like a lot of different recipes? And will the actual food give you some buffs or debuffs or whatever?
Yeah, so it'll be very similar to Breath of the Wild, or Genshin Impact, where you do have different recipes and they all have different attributes.
Cool. And then last two questions. What kind of things will be filling up the open map areas to make them feel less open and less empty? Like, will we have the fruits to pick up? Will we have the traveling NPCs that you could interact with? Or are we just expecting like a vast fields of forest, and then you just see a lot of Sentius until you reach another kingdom? Or like, what's the idea?
The thing is, you're going to see a lot of Sentius. You're going to see the temples, the fragments. So you're going to be connecting fragments between kingdoms, looking for the different Shoy relics and ancient buildings. And then you have traveling villagers that will follow the roads. And on top of that, we're just going to increase the amount of things that spawn. Like you mentioned, berries. There will be more resource types, and then you'll also come across hostile AI like the Void or the Yagi or the Chojin. So I think there's a lot of different things you're going to come across, but the bread and butter is just Sentius and the biome itself, because you can always harvest and build anywhere. And we do want the world to be somewhat open so that you take command of it and actually use it.
Right. That sounds pretty interesting. And then the last question from the community was, will there be a robust system in place to deal with hackers, or is that even an issue in your opinion at the moment? Like, I personally in PvE don't see why that would be an issue at all, because people will be able to set up their own stats and whatever. But obviously in PvP, that's a bit more of an issue.
So this is exactly why we're going to make you build two characters, one for PvP and one for PvE, one for dedicated. Sorry, that's not correct. One for dedicated servers, one for locally hosted servers. So this means you couldn't load some cheat hack onto your computer and then take that character and upload it to a dedicated server and screw everybody over. Instead, if you log in a dedicated server, you have to abide by the rules set by the host. So we're going to be able to install anti-cheat type of things.
Right. All right. That sounds perfect. If there's any other questions in the next 2 minutes, pop them into the chat. We'll read through them. Otherwise, I think we went through pretty much all of the questions that I managed to gather. Again, sorry guys for the initial technology interruptions. It wasn't intentional. My internet just went bananas for whatever reason. I actually have another one. Slipnir asked, is endgame content a focus, or is it more just like a plan of you just build on, do whatever you want in the future, and that's up to you? Or is there anything that you guys are actively planning on implementing for the endgame?
Well, there will be actual endgame components that are displayed through the pyramids and temples. As you reach more temples, you'll actually start to interact with the Shoei elders, and they will be real story characters. And the real endgame is getting the last tier to your legendary weapon, and then also probably some sort of a battle with Verox or something. Like basically an Ender Dragon style battle with Verox.
Right. And then Drew actually asked, will each of the dynasties have at least one legendary weapon per class?
Yes. Every dynasty will have one legendary weapon per class. That is correct. And some of them, we may make some of them universal. For example, I think that the Paladin legendary weapon we may actually in fact make all of them universal, so that regardless of which dynasty you pick, that legendary weapon is the same for your class. So the Ranger Longbow legendary is the same for all dynasties.
Interesting. All right.
Because then there's also a champion's weapon. So the champion's weapon, like when I showed Hotaru, that was his champion weapon. Let me pull it up. Because you can see it's got the elemental. It's a magma weapon. So you have your champion weapon. This is also a champion armor set, most likely, at least the torso. So the champion weapon and armor set is the highest level armor and weapon set you can get for your dynasty. But then there's also the legendary weapon, which is like the Sentius Gauntlet. Everyone has the same Sentius Gauntlet. Doesn't matter what dynasty you are, because it's the Shoei dynasty's technology. It's not the Draconian Sentius Gauntlet. It's just the Sentius Gauntlet.
And I assume those will have obviously buffs and debuffs depending on who you are going against, right?
What do you mean? Which weapon?
So if I'm using the Shoei legendary weapon,
yeah.
Why would I decide to go for any other weapon than that if that's the legendary?
Oh, well, right, because it's elemental.
Weapon?
Well, it's elemental, so it's going to have some of the best. Well, the thing is, it will never break. It's a perma weapon. So there's weapon durability for basic weapons. Now, the reason you would use another weapon, even though you have permanent durability for your legendary weapon, is first of all, there'll probably be some sort of a decharge where you have to go and refill the charge, but also it's elemental and it's only plasma, which is a good balanced type against all types, but it's not going to be super effective against some types. You'll want to use another type of weapon.
Right.
So that's it's an elemental advantage as well that you're balancing, as well as the level of the weapon and the damage. It's also the element.
Yeah, and Nelly asked there, can you actually use a weapon from another dynasty? I think we already answered that, but
that's actually encouraged because that's how you're going to balance your character's element.
Nice. All right. I think that's pretty much it, what I had on the board today. Thank you so much, Justin, for this. Also, guys, I'm really sorry for the tech interruptions. It is what it is. Also, thanks for the follow. I've seen a lot of people following, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Justin, unless you have anything else you want to pop out there, maybe tell people when the next stream is going to be or something like that.
I would just say stay tuned with everything in the Discord and everything, because we do have a ton of content that's going to be coming out, an insane amount of content, but it's all about making sure it's all done right. So we'll be doing daily screenshots, daily updates as usual, and as we get into later rounds of pre-alpha, we'll be just doing daily gameplay, really, so just stay tuned for that.